Fantastic. We are live. Welcome back, everybody, to the Take a Stand live event. And remember, take a stand isn't necessarily taking a stand against other people, but it's taking a stand for yourself. When you can take a stand for yourself, then you can deal with the outside world much more effectively. But ultimately, it starts with you. So over the next 4 days, I'm going to be talking with some amazing women who are all sharing their stories of triumph over trauma. They're going to share with you the complexity of what it is that they've experienced, not the whole story, but a snippet of the story, and then also how they have navigated the complexity of what it is that they have experienced. If you are following on YouTube, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining and coming back. Remember, click the subscribe button if you haven't joined already, hit the notification bell. And more importantly, from our conversation, mine and Holly's conversation, if you can think of someone in your network who could really do with listening to the advice it is that Holly's going to share, please do forward them this video. I'm sure it will really help them out. So welcome, Holly. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's so great to be here.
And I can't remember why we connected, but we connected. It must have been about 6 months ago, I think.
Yeah, it's been a little bit now.
Yeah, and you have a adopted daughter. She adopted, fostered?
She is being adopted. We have our adoption date on the 21st, actually, from the UK.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, well done. But we are both from the same little village. It is a little village-ish town in the UK, which is just bizarre because obviously you're across the other side of the pond, which, yeah, it was a random connection, wasn't it? It was quite interesting.
It really was. It's interesting how the world works and how people come together sometimes, isn't it?
It is. So, Holly, can you share a story with us of triumph over trauma so listeners can get a new perspective of how abuse and trauma impacts an individual?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess the main source of my trauma is for most people is early childhood trauma. For me, I was sexually abused by my grandfather. It started at around age 3. Of course, my time frame is a little fuzzy because I was so young. I didn't really have a sense of time at that point, but well before school and pretty much as long as I can remember, he had molested me. And it was in somewhat of a gentle way. So I didn't realize for a number of years that I was being abused. I knew I didn't like the interactions that I had with him. I knew that I kind of had to put on a happy face after he would separate me and segregate me from the group. I was the only girl. He was the father of 3 boys, and I had 2 younger brothers and I had 2 older male cousins. So I was the only girl. So I was the only one targeted. So nobody really seemed to be aware of what was going on, although I wasn't his first victim. But this happened for a number of years and went on until I had a school conference at 9 years old that talked about abuse. And like any other conference, at first I was just excited to kind of get out of class and go do something that was not my typical day, which I think most kids usually are like happy to go to an assembly. Usually there was something cool like science or, something exciting that they would teach you about that you didn't know about. Well, on this day, I was just like, oh, I'm going to go hear about, what it's like for kids that get, brutalized by their parents is really kind of what I thought. I didn't really have any frame of reference for myself as being abused up to that point. And they'd kind of gone through a couple different types of abuse and then had gotten into sexual abuse. And when they got into sexual abuse and defined that as it could be something that your father did to you, it could be something that your uncle did to you, it could be something that your grandfather did to you, I went, oh, whoa, like, that's not okay. Like what he's been doing to me my whole life, I knew I hated it, but I didn't know until then that it was actually wrong. And like so many ways, and kind of was a shock to my system. It was really a hard thing to accept at first. And I went into a real deep trauma state, rocking in the corner, kind of just like not playing on the playground, just really like reclused inside of myself. And within like a week, I disclosed to my mom what was happening. And luckily, I was believed, put into therapy. And then from there, it got more and more complicated. I went through a series of therapy, getting help, having my parents believe me, but not wanting to prosecute my grandfather. My mom wanted to, but my dad didn't. It was his father. And I remember hearing terms like family doesn't do that to family. And I remember thinking, well, why was it okay for him to do what he did to me then? Very confusing, very complex at that age. It was a lot to process. And actually, like 3 years later, I was sent to live with him, which makes me very much question my parents' sanity. I only lived with him for a few months, but I lived with him and one of his first victims, who had left like a really abusive relationship, was staying there with him. And he ended up getting pulled out of school anyways. Very complicated situation. It's kind of, I feel that the whole sequence of events that followed me finding out that I was an abused child was almost more traumatic than the abuse itself. And I think just because of the nature of it, because it happened so early, like I really didn't know what was going on until later. Now, of course, it's all traumatic, but finding out like that after it's been going on for 6-7 years is pretty crazy. And then getting help and then getting sent back there was just a lot. But from that point, I really started helping other kids, talking to other kids, speaking about my experience. Like I literally was like 10 years old speaking in my class about my experience and talking about how it wasn't okay for people to do that. And it's really important to tell, and, all those kind of things early on. And that gave me a lot of my power back, because it helped me to realize that, hey, maybe I could make a bit of a difference. And I'm 43 now. I've been helping other people through this stuff since then, a lot more, effectively since I've been older. I do coach people and help people, which is wonderful. And so that is kind of been my like full circle, was, starting out with, very early trauma, so early that, you don't know at that age, until somebody discloses to you that it's bad, or when it's so violent and traumatic that you're getting like injured and stuff, and then other people notice, which wasn't the case for me. So nobody else noticed. It took me being informed by outside people to understand. I was taught stranger danger. Nobody told me to fear family. So it's complex. And the truth is, family and the people that are closest to you are 99.9% of the time the ones who offend. And telling people to be scared of strangers is probably nonsense.
Out of date. Yeah. Totally out of touch.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much, the basis of my story. And of course, because of that lovely start that I had to life, I ended up being, reoffended on, a few times in my life. And I think it's just because that early abuse just kind of sets you up. I was kind of just froze up when I was a kid. And so when people would mistreat me later in life, I kind of just did the same thing. I would kind of freeze up and just not know how to respond. It was just, that was kind of my not very functional coping mechanism. But, I've learned a lot now. I'm now coaching other people. I do teach people to stand up for themselves. I do try to help people to, focus that mindset and not freeze in those moments, and learn how to say no, which I did learn how to do. And, now I'm doing great. I've been married for 23 years. I have 3 children, 2 biological and 1 adopted. So I'm doing, quite well for myself and serving other people, which has been a fantastic turnabout. You just never know when you have that kind of a start, what it could go multiple different ways,
Yeah, for sure. There's something that you touched on a bit earlier on, was that you went from one thing to the next. And I think that is, it's so true. If trauma isn't healed, isn't known about, the abuse isn't dealt with, or the emotions and the complexity of that, is that what often happens is that you find yourself ending up in other abusive situations. And it could be different types of, I think, it can be different levels and different types of abuse and different situations. I mean, for me, it was always played out at work. I always got into problems at work because I was still living in fear, still dealing with trauma. I was always constantly triggered. And it just reminded me, as you were talking there, of how trauma creates more trauma, how abuse will create more abuse or abusive situations with different people, because you're still reliving from those experiences.
Well, yeah, and you're functioning out of a dysfunctional way of being taught. And I think, probably the greatest thing that I overcame, and I've only been able to talk about this for a few years because I hated myself for it for a number of years, was that I was sexualized so early that I did a lot of sexual things with different kids, with neighborhood kids and things like that. And that was something that I hated myself for. But when I was in therapy at 9 to 10 years old, I only went to therapy for 1 year, which I think is fabulously overrated. My therapist, who was like in her mid 50s, I remember her telling me that it was okay to do sexual things with people who were your own age, because I asked, because I had been engaging in sexual behavior with kids. I didn't disclose to her what I was doing.
Right.
But I did ask her, like, when was it okay, to do those kind of things? Like, was it ever okay to do those kinds of things? Something that nobody talks about, but then you're here with this person who's trying to help you deal with the fact that this has happened to you. And you're like, okay, well, this is the person that I need to ask about sexual things, in my child mind, I knew nothing different. And she told me that it was okay when it was with somebody that was your age, was somebody that wanted to do it, that it was, and I thought, well, I didn't force anybody to do anything. Like, I might have come up with the idea because of what had happened to me and just because of being sexualized, but I didn't, I never forced myself on another child. But children are gullible, and children are, compliant most of the time, and also interested in new things. And it's something that they hadn't experienced either. And so, of course, with my experience, I didn't know what I was doing was not appropriate because I had no frame of reference for it. Nobody talked. But at 12 years old, I had the police called on me. They came, and I'm in California, and they came with their guns and their, big scary voices, and told me that, that I was wrong and that I could go to jail for that. And I mean, terrified the hell out of me, which now I kind of look at as, in a lot of ways, it was a good thing. It certainly made me stop doing that. But it was the first time that I realized that what I was doing was not okay. And that's something that I find shocking, is that you could go through therapy and that you could get help, and that there's no reference for this repeated cycle. I mean, you have this little child that literally, as a toddler, was sexualized. It's pretty natural to replay what is going on with you. You imitate what is happening. And I was terrified to talk about it. I've worked with children my whole life. I was scared to be labeled as a monster. I was scared that I maybe was a monster. I didn't know. And at that point, I had really identified myself as being in the same category as my grandfather, because hell, nobody even called the police on him, but the police sure came to me and scared the shit out of me. Excuse my mouth. But like, that experience was like, whoa, I must be really bad. And I really had like associated myself with that for a number of years. I would say from 12 to 17, I absolutely hated myself under the surface. And, finally, like when I was around 17, I started really processing things a little bit more and saying, like, I never, ever meant to hurt anybody. I never set out to hurt anybody. I never set out to be cruel. I never set out to be to sexualize anybody. I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. And the moment I learned, I stopped, and I was like, you know, I got to give myself some credit for the fact that, like, this was not something I was doing to perpetrate people. This was something I was doing because I truly knew nothing better. I knew nothing different. You know, now I'm able to forgive myself for those things. But honestly, I don't think I forgave myself until I was like 38, 39 years old. I mean, it took a hell of a long time to get through that. Because it felt dirty. It felt scary. It felt wrong. It felt evil. You know, especially the way that I, you know, learned that what I was doing was not okay. And I just think people need to really be mindful of that and really learn to give children the right information, stop hiding things. You know, had I known that I wasn't supposed to be being touched by, you know, a family member or a friend or anybody that you knew was not supposed to touch you there, I think I would have blew the whistle years and years before. I did.
It's weird. It's weird, isn't it? Considering I think it was 1 in 5 people will have experienced some form of abuse, and I find it weird how these things are just taboo, not spoken about, are kept secret, and yet it's so prolific, it's so common, and I just find it bizarre that therapists, I'm going to pick on therapists now, go for training for years and years, and yet they can't pick any of this stuff up or deal with it in an appropriate, in a way that's going to be bloody helpful for people.
Right. That's going to serve. And that's my biggest thing. And that's my biggest and my platform and my coaching when I help, you know, I love helping parents that have a child that has disclosed and they've never, because it's, you know, it's important. I want to work with parents that don't even know anything about this, that like can start teaching their children early, start talking to them early, because prevention is everything. I mean, if, you know, if you have crazy parents, like, I don't know, like how you can prevent that entirely when it's happening in your own home. But damn, if you're a good parent and you care about your child, there's so many things that you can do to protect your children better than what society teaches us is okay. And for me, that's powerful. For me, that is what gives me the power to talk about the things that I used to be scared of myself from. Is because, you know, if it helps somebody to mitigate, stop, prevent anyway this happening to their children, or this perpetuating this cyclic nature of abuse, which is really lack of information. It's because we choose not to talk about things that are so damn important. And why? Because we're scared. We're scared of a vagina. We're scared of a penis. It is a body part. It is just like teaching your children eyes, nose, ears, and mouth. We come with it. It's natural. It is a part of our body. And to shame it, to blame it, to not talk about it is an absolute atrocity. And it is the source of so much abuse in this world, is our fear of sexuality, our fear of being able to openly talk and discuss what is going on in our body. It is an important part of our body, and it's an important part of human nature. You know, so why we find it so taboo is just shocking to me.
It is shocking. It is shocking.
And it's ignorant.
And I think that you touched on something really important, which is the whole educational piece. It's one of the driving forces behind this event, is to try and close the education gap around the subject. So people have more tools at their disposal. They know there are different ways, different things that they can try to move themselves out of the trauma it is that they're still experiencing. Because you've got all I knew about was the doctors and the mental health system. And there is so much more to dealing with trauma and abuse and healing than those two. I was going to say archaic then. out of date, out of touch, out of reality systems that, yes, they have their place, they are important, but there are other modalities that people can use to start the conversation, to start to think about recovery and healing in a different way. So they can hear stories of other people's experiences like yourself and think, oh my God, that happened to me. I didn't realize that that was wrong. Because the reality is that, you know, you may learn it when you're a child. You may learn it and hear it for the first time when you're 40 or 50.
Mm-hmm.
That's how complex it is, and how there is such a lack of education, a lack of knowledge that people just are not getting access to because the things aren't spoken about. I just find it bizarre.
It is. And, you know, the thing for me that like gets me at my core is just like, you know, so many brilliant minds have said, like, you know, knowledge is power. Wisdom is knowledge applied. When we choose to omit knowledge, we're failing everyone. And this is something that we fail to teach knowledge about. So there's no wisdom in our culture about sexual understanding. And I think that this drives people to do sexually weird things that we call taboo and wrong, and, you know, being with animals, you know, weird things. Mm-hmm. When you don't talk about it and abuse is your first exposure to it, it creates a lot of screwed up situations. And this is mitigatable by talking about health and your body and normalness. Like, what is safe touch? What is healthy touch? Geez, like, you should be grown, in love, comfortable with the person. You should know your body probably before you start engaging with another person that you are in love with. You need to take time with yourself. And we are so scared to talk about this. And it's a shame. It's an atrocity. It's an absolute failure to humanity. And I'm very passionate about it because I lived so many years being abused and accidentally reoffending other people as a little kid because people are afraid to talk about what healthy is.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy. And this happens around the globe in 2022. This is still happening all over. We are so like traumatized by religious like taboos, by, you know, repetitious like ancestral beliefs, things that we're holding on to that are so damn old and outdated that we create massive dysfunction in society, and it is overcomable. It is all just about sharing health information, health, like generally health, like that's it. Like, talk about what healthy is, you know. It's really like just shocking to my system that we are still operating in the same shit. This happened to me in the 80s. Here it is 40 years later, and we're still like using the same like ignorant mindset for what? You know, now all we talk about, it's okay to talk about in school that, you know, like girls want to change their gender to be a boy, and that boys and girls like are intimate with each other in the States. Like, this is okay to talk about, like, you know, gayness and all this stuff, but it's not okay to teach your toddler about body autonomy, about like what Americans about like, what the hell, like,
it's got really complicated. It's got from sitting in Thailand and watching things, which isn't always the best thing to do, of course, but it seems to have got really complicated.
It is
really, really unnecessarily complicated.
I have friends that have children that, you know, at 10 years old, because this is when they start talking about the like the gay, bisexual, like transgender, like drag queens, all these different all these different ways of expressing your sexuality. We start talking about that now at like 10 years old, and you have children that are probably typically straight starting to have interesting questions about, right now I'm 10 and my girlfriends are more appealing to me than these boys with cooties. And so then they start thinking, well, maybe I'm gay. And they start asking those questions so early, but we can't teach them about body autonomy. Like, I just like, what is that? Like, I'm fine with teaching all of this stuff, but like when you just start coming out with that at like 10 years old and there's no preface to it, there's no other reference, like how about teach about health and well-being, like very, very early to toddlers. I mean, we can teach about this when you're potty training, starting, and very appropriately. There's different ways to go about it. And, instead we're going like full, like, I hate to say it like this, but balls deep at like 10, 12 years old and talking to kids about like the really like extremities of sexuality, which is great. I think we should all be informed, but really that's their first conversation about it. Like for a lot of kids, like, and we're doing this in public school.
Bizarre.
Why is there no preface to that? Why is there not like natural steps of like health and well-being that precurse that? It's really wild to me. And it's a tragic, that like, I think for myself, like I had to learn about this in public school and I had to wait until I was 9 years old to understand that what was happening to me was wrong. Why do we not always talk about this? Why does this not always, why does this conversation doesn't happen from the get-go? Like,
something that plays on my mind, and this is, I think this is just the complexity of my own experiences, is that, the statistics are pretty shocking.
1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys are sexually abused. That's just sexual abuse.
It's really It's really shocking. And I guess that is why it's not been spoken about, is because there are just so many abusers that why would they want it to be spoken about?
But what are we doing? We're protecting them. We're protecting.
Well, I know. I agree. I completely get it. But it's the only thing that I can think of that makes sort of any sense to me. But that might just be because of my own lived experiences. But it just doesn't make sense to me otherwise.
It really doesn't. I mean, we're protecting the wrong people by not talking.
Completely.
But you're only protecting the abuser by keeping silence and keeping it secret.
But it's almost like it's an epidemic for sure. I've got no absolutely.
That's what I said during this whole COVID thing. I'm like, the real global tragedy is what's going on inside the privacy of people's home, inside the secrecy of the taboos that we hold that protect the evil, creepy, abusive people in the world. Like, why do we do this? Like, there's such a better way. And it really is just knowledge and talking and education and having some freedom of speech. It's a shame that these things get taken off the internet, and it happens.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm like thinking about the summit, and I'm thinking, God, I wonder if let's see what happens. That would be really interesting if that happened.
Yeah.
What do you see what would you say is the number one thing that people present with you? What is the one thing, that one thread that is across the people that come to you, that work with you, that is the tip? I was going to say, what's the tipping point, but I don't think that's the right question. I think it's just, what's the common theme for everybody?
I think what I notice mostly is just the fear of disclosure, just the fear of even getting it out of your own body, just talking about what's actually happened. I think that is the hardest thing for people to do. And then that's when the processing starts happening. And then, and then once you get there and you start to allow yourself to process like all the varieties of ways that these kind of atrocities can be committed against us, and the way that they presented themselves in our lives, and we find a way of minimizing what's happened to us throughout our lives, and making excuses for it, and trying to
it wasn't that bad.
Yeah,
it wasn't that bad. They had it much worse than me.
Yeah, other people's stories is worse. Like, people, like, even I've done it to myself, because I wasn't like violently attacked.
Oh, well, you
I
do
think,
it, yeah.
like I wasn't violently attacked, but what happened to me made gentle creepy, made, and that's an atrocity in and of itself, is to take a touch and make it scary, and make it fearful, and just not knowing how to react, and being afraid of your own self and your own feelings and the sensations that you have in your body. That's a tragedy. Nobody should have that fear. And that's why it's so important to talk about, because like I said, knowledge is power. And when you use the knowledge and you apply it, we have a wise society that doesn't have to function in this kind of dysfunction. And when you talk about it all the time, it won't be scary to tell. It won't be scary to get help. And you won't be blamed for somebody coming after you. It's all about like this fear, fear of explaining reality and the depth of what people go through. And it's ignorance. It's blatant ignorance.
It's a double whammy, isn't it? Because you're dealing with your own emotions and the damage that abuse and trauma creates. And then you have, these other systems, other people that just deny it. So it's you're caught between a rock and a hard place, as they say, in terms of you're dealing with your own internal resistance to disclosure. Then you're dealing with complicated systems, families, police, health, whoever.
Generational like taboos. Taboos, social taboos. Like it's just the numbers of things that keep us silent are
it's endless. It is endless. It is. What if you had a piece of advice for your younger self, what would it be?
Hang in there, it's gonna get better. No matter how hard it is, it does get better. And the more time that you take to like process all of these things, like, and to understand them, you find out that, you're not the terror, you're not the problem. The society and the way we view things is really, really the core issue. It's not even really the abusers and the abusee that's the problem. It's the lack there of understanding of health and what that is, and how we best suit ourselves. So, just stick in there with yourself and believe in yourself, because this is all like overcomable by learning how to love and accept yourself for who you are, and understand that a lot of these failures are not even from your abuser. They're really not even just from your abuser. Yes, your abuser did commit acts against you, but it is in a society that allows for it because of silence, because of secrecy. It is truly the core issue. I really believe that with every ounce of my being. It is the solution to the problem.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Holly. And
you're welcome.
This is a very heavy subject. It's very emotional. People who are listening, as I said earlier, if things are popping up for you, make sure that you get the support it is that you need. Reach out to Holly, reach out to me. We will point you in the right direction if we can't help you ourselves. But make sure you do get the help. You don't need to deal with this by yourself. There are people that can support you, and are people that can help you. It might take a little bit of digging. You might not get it right first time, but that's okay. That's just the way it is. Unfortunately, that's life. But, you know, just make sure that you reach out and get the support it is that you need. And it took me a late 40s until I actually realized what it is that I'd been through and could actually acknowledge what it is that I'd been through. So you might realize it when you're young, but you might realize it when you're older. But please just make sure you get the support, because this is a very heavy and emotional subject for a lot of people. So thank you so much, Holly. Thank you for sharing your story.
And the support is out there. There's so many people who have been through exactly what you've been through. I mean, different people, different times, same situations. It's something that happens over and over. And there's somebody out there who understands. Keep looking till you find them.
Yeah,
because
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you so much for having me, Wendy. It's been lovely.
Oh no, the pleasure is all mine. It's just something that we need to speak about. It's got to be constantly on the agenda, constantly spoken about. No hiding, just straight, honest conversation.
Yeah, we
increase
just
education.
We gotta lift the weight and the taboos off and just allow ourselves to come out with the reality of what we have to deal with, because it's there.
Yeah.
And there's no pretending that makes it go away. And it's amazing when you start accepting it and all the fears that we have over it, like how free you become just by acknowledging and processing, just by letting it out of your body, letting it out of your mouth, letting it out of your experience. Because somebody else is also going through it. And when you start helping other people, wow, it's life-changing. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge you as well, because it's unusual for someone to talk about them also having sexualized behavior as well, and then repeating that, because that's naturally what we do. But I'm very proud of you for being able to share that openly. I guess it just backs up what it is. No, it's not. It just backs up what it is that you have been sharing, though. So I just wanted to acknowledge you for that, because I think that it's brave. It's very courageous.
It's the only way to come full circle, and it's the only way to free ourselves from this fear of secret, and the secrecy. Like I said, this all stopped at 12 for me. I was a baby. I was still very young, and we can hold on to that guilt forever and hold it within us, or we can realize that this is a social problem.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to finish with? Any final thought?
No, I think I think we pretty much covered what I think is the absolute most detriment to really get past, and to stop crediting all of ourselves with the problems that people impose on us, that society has imposed on us for generations, and to acknowledge where the true problem is going to empower people to heal, because it is not your problem. It is not your fault. It is something you can change within yourself, and it's something that you can help others change within themselves, and that is empowering. And we don't need to be held back by social taboos. Being real, being honest, being open, and starting to share our hearts and share our stories is where we realize that we're all suffering in similar ways. We have different things that have happened to us, but once we learn to overcome that, it's so incredibly powerful. And when we realize the faults that we have socially, there's really a chance for change, and that's all I hope for.
Yeah. Perfect. As I said, thank you very much, Holly, for joining me. And I will put Holly's details below the video. So if you want to reach out to Holly, you've got her contact details. And just to make sure that you reach out to her and that you've got the support and help it is that you need. Take care, beautiful. All the best. And I will speak to you soon.
Sounds great. Thank you.